This
Oh.
movie's about crushes, and it's kind of funny because Silent Bob may have been one of my first crushes growing up. So very full circle moment for me.
What was it, may I ask, about Silent Bob? Like, I guess he's easy to crush on because, like, you don't fucking say anything. No controversial opinions. Like,
You
not
know,
healthy.
I was just telling my partner this. It was that moment in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back when you just go to the closeout
Let
scene, and I just was like, I love him. I just something about the character was
me
just
tell
so
you. Let
easy to
me tell you
love.
something. I'm not number one. Thank you. That's adorable. Number two, I am not somebody that like talks about the acting craft in a very lofty way or something like that. But like, there was truth in that performance, and I think that's why that moment communicates. Where he's just like, and then fucking he walks away. He's like, it
Uh,
just
it, it,
one of my favorite moments in anything I've ever done. And I'm not like patting myself on the back, but like it's 2001. As the lead character of a movie, one of the two titular leads saying he would blow the other one. Like I felt very progressive.
no, and it is. It's like again, like I love the 2000s for the gay jokes that we got. Sometimes though, it was like okay, okay, and then that was it
If
was just a
that's not a
perfect kind of
fucking bumper sticker or a t-shirt, I don't know what is. I love the 2000s for the gay jokes that we got.
you got to take in what you have, and
Ew, dude, you were really gonna suck my dick.
Work, and I've talked about this. So if I've talked about it and you're like, I fucking heard it, you can cut me off. But like that all exists because my brother is gay. And when he was driving me up to film school to drop me off in Vancouver, we went from my uncle's house in Seattle, drove up to Vancouver. My mom, like 2 months prior, had outed my brother to me. She's to be forgiven. This was like 1993, 90. Well, wait a second, 90, technically 92, because we made Clerks in 93. So this is 1992. She didn't understand, like, you don't fucking out somebody and shit. So one day I come home from Quick Stop and my mom goes, sit down. I have to tell you something. It's like 11 o'clock at night. And I think she's going to be like, your father's dead. She's so grave. And she goes, I sit down. She goes, your brother is gay. And for 1 second, I was like, what? And then instantly I was like, that makes absolute sense, man. I was like, oh my God. I was like, but then I was like, why didn't he tell me? Why are you telling me this? You're not. And even then I knew. I was like, you're not supposed to be telling me this. She's like, I know. You can't tell him that you know. And I was like, well, why'd you tell me? Why didn't he tell me? And then I got really fixated on like, why didn't my brother tell me he was gay? Like my brother and I are super close. We shared a fucking bedroom growing up and whatnot. He's 4 years older than me. I'm born on his birthday. So he's been my hero my whole fucking life. I speak like him. Like if you ever see my brother talk, you learn where I got it from. My taste in movies, in music, television, comedy, all set by my brother and stuff like that. So I was like, why didn't he fucking tell me? And I couldn't bring it up because it was like, even then, you can't be like, hey man, get in somebody's face about why they didn't come to you. And we didn't have this word, or maybe we did, but I wasn't aware of it then. But I remember feeling like, does he think I don't like gay people? Essentially, I was like, does he think I'm fucking homophobic? Like, I'm not one of those
mhm.
people. So we're driving to Vancouver to go to film school, and he was going to drop me off. And because he's more of a world traveler than I, like he left to go to college, never came home and shit. I never left home. I went away to school and then came back and stuff. It was a real house bug. So he's driving me up, and I'm like, all right, but on the drive, I'm going to bring it up. And the whole ride, I can't find a way to bring it up and shit. And so when we cross the border and we're in Canada, and Vancouver City skyline is within view. So I know we're going to be there within like 10, 15 minutes. That's when I finally pulled a trigger and I turned to my brother. I'm like, so I understand you have an alternative lifestyle. And my brother starts like fucking laughing. And he's like, that's one way to put it. And I was like, why didn't you tell me? Like, did you not think I could handle it? I'd make fun of you. And he goes, I just haven't had a chance to like have a face to face with you. And he was like, this was going to be it. Of course, mom ruined it probably. I was like, she did. Mom fucking told me. So that scene in Chasing Amy where Banky is just like, what is this like? What is that like with Alyssa Jones? That happened in real life with me and my brother, where I was like, what is this like? Is a Singapore sling real? Have you ever done a glory hole? Like I just went down the list of all that shit. And then I said to my brother, I was like, what about movies? And he's like, what about them? I was like, well, like every fucking movie is like a guy meets a girl and they fall in love and shit like that. He goes, well, I can identify with love. And I was like, right. I was like, but like, don't you ever want to see yourself? And he's like, yeah, it'd be nice to look up and see people that look like me and stuff like that. And so going into my film career, I had this like mission. an agenda. And when they talk about like these fucking liberals, they got an agenda. I mean, maybe they're right, because my agenda going in was like, I know my brother's going to have to sit through my movies because we're related. And there's always got to be something in there for him, like going forward. So if he's sitting through this fucking, like these goddamn breeder movies, there's something that he feels seen by. The same way, anytime I went to a movie and somebody was like, blah, 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 New Jersey. And I was like, New Jersey? That's where I live. And I feel seen and shit. I was like, I'm going to include that shit for my brother. And so early on, you know, there's always this kind of counter to what you would imagine, at least at the time, very inclusive kind of lean toward the other, if you will, that had everything to do with my brother. It wasn't like, you know, I could make this world a better place. I just didn't want my brother to be bored at my movies. Like I wanted him to be entertained and also him to feel seen. That's always been like a big thing in my world. I don't know why. Maybe because I was the youngest of 3 kids, but I was the baby, so I was seen. But it's kind of why I started filmmaking. I'd watch movies and I wouldn't see myself or my friends. Now that's all I fucking see. But there was a time in the culture where like they didn't talk about, you know, fucking nerdy white guys who fucking, I mean, not even white guys, nerdy guys who fucking love movies and, you know, don't understand women as well as they understand fucking Boba Fett or something like that. And now that there's a lot of that. But in the beginning, there wasn't. And I was like, I just want to see me and my friends up on that screen. And in the quest to do that, in a quest to reflect me and my world, my brother is a part of my world. So even though I didn't hang out, and I remember saying to my brother, I was like, you're the first gay person I know. And he's like, no, I'm not. He was like, you know a lot of gay people and you're going to know that soon, you know, over the course of your life, it's going to occur to you. And he's absolutely right. It's like slowly people started coming out being like, oh, that makes sense. So I felt like, you know, because I love my brother, my movies got better and more inclusive from the jump, because, you know, I was serving this kind of quiet agenda of not of like, you know, let's radicalize people and shit. But I was like, let me entertain my brother. And then I realized I had an audience. You know, by the second, third flick in, you know, you realize there's a certain amount of people listening to you and whatnot. And I was like, well, let's if they're listening, let's say positive things. Let's show them that maybe like the other is not so fucking scary and shit like that. I owe all that to my brother. So that moment in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back literally comes down to that ride up to Vancouver with my brother and me being like, I always got to include something in these breeder movies for Don.
I mean, so much to dive into there. One, they are listening because the Catholic Church stole your doll. I saw that today and I was just like, I mean, come on.
Bro, you have no idea how happy that was for me I was to see that, because I'm like, this is the only time I'll ever have a Simpsons moment where I'm like, he called the future. Yeah, he go figure, he did it somehow. So I am enjoying my Simpsons moment where I was like, yeah, I told you they get rid of that creepy crucifix and they bring in something cute.
No, and I just love,
not for nothing, but why would you do a fucking wide-eyed child? Like,
well,
read the room, kids.
Yeah,
like,
a little on the nose. Yeah, no, it's
unbelievable.
Great.
It makes Buddy Christ look tame by comparison.
Right. I mean, again, your movies have aged well, and I love that this one is, I think, going to age even better. I love 4:30 movie. I love your reflective vibe. When did you start kind of brewing this in your head? Obviously, it seems like forever. It seems like that road trip and things like that. But again, I mean, even going down to the one wrestling friend who I was the wrestling friend. So I mean, again, I'm like, get out of my life, Kevin. Get out of here.
It honestly, like, thank you for that. The my wrestling friend was Ernie O'Donnell, who the Bernie character is based on. He runs Smart Castle Cinemas. And he was the dude that was like, you know, we were like, Ernie, wrestling's not real. And then he'd put you in a headlock and be like, say wrestling's real. Where it came from, obviously, other than like, hey man, I live this shit, was I first nod goes to Paul Thomas Anderson for Licorice Pizza. So I saw Licorice Pizza and I was like, oh shit, like what a great thing, like a paean to one's youth, the roadmap to how one got here. And to me, I never thought about doing that because I thought Clerks was that. Like Clerks is like the story of young me. But because of Licorice Pizza, I was like, there was a younger you once. you know, maybe not as marketable as Clerks Kevin Smith, but like, why don't you reach back further and tell that story? So you know, it lodged in my head, but it didn't like start there. It wasn't like I started writing that day. It wasn't until we bought the movie theater. So the movie theater we grew up going to, the Atlantic Highlands Twin Cinema, it was called when I was a kid, turned slowly into a multiplex over the years, got 5 screens, and has been in existence as a movie theater for over 100 years. So suddenly, post-COVID, they fall on hard times and looked like the place was going to close. They were going to knock the building down, make it apartments and shit like that. So me and my friends came in, bought the place, and kind of saved it. So right away, you know, I was like, oh my God, this is like fucking Quick Stop. Like I got a location. So I'm going to make a movie in here, you know? And honestly, I never thought about it until people started talking about it, but like 4:30 movie was kind of formed the way Clerks was, in as much as like location first, the story will follow once you have the location. Same thing with 4:30 movie. I was like, oh, I could make a movie here. And since it looks so old and it's never been refurbished, and the seats are the same seats that I sat in when I saw Friday the 13th part 2, like this could be a period piece. This is my best chance I have making a Merchant Ivory fucking period piece, man. As long as I don't shoot outside the theater and shoot the real world, everything in here looks like the early 80s and stuff. Probably because it was put there in the late 60s, you know, so it's just when I was of age, it looks like the 80s to me, but I think those seats probably went in the late 60s, if I remember correctly. So before we refurbished the theater, I'm like, let's get rid of these old seats and bring in those comfy seats. I was like, as long as we point a camera at these fucking seats, we can make this movie set in the 80s. And so then I had the location and I had a time period. And then thanks to Paul Thomas Anderson, I was like, oh, this could be a pay on to my lost youth, or the days of spent hours in a movie theater that led to me being a filmmaker, you know, when I grew up. So I seized upon the structure of like my first date with my high school girlfriend, Kim Lochran, and suddenly we were off to the races. And, you know, mind you, this is like, I was making this movie after I got out of the nut house. Like I went fucking crazy for a minute. And so I came out, I was fragile as fuck, man. I wasn't smoking weed. And first movie I directed in like a decade where I hadn't been smoking weed. So I was like fucking dialed in, wide-eyed, crisp, emotional, like while I was making the movie. People I'd worked with before was like, you were different on this movie than you ever were before. And I was like, yeah, because I was, you know, aside from the obvious reasons, I was desperately trying to recapture a moment and a feeling. And I realized, oh my God, that's what you do for a living. All of these movies are not like me going, let me take you on a flight of fancy. It's like me going, I remember something happened to me. It was so impactful in my head and heart that I want to try to communicate to you. And I'm going to fabricate that moment artificially. I'm going to bring in actors who will lie and tell you that they're this person. And I will recreate everything surrounding the circumstances to try to capture something that was so fucking pure. And I think that's why the movie kind of works. It's not thinking too hard. And this movie, believe me, doesn't have anything original on its mind. But it's what's on its heart that I think that's why people connect with it. And we could smell our own movie lovers. You know what I'm saying? And you can watch this movie and understand this is made by somebody who fucking loves movies. Whether or not he's good at making them is beyond the point and irrelevant. But it's like, clearly, this motherfucker has a love of film that has lasted 30 years. And he's speaking to me, even though he's not trying, because, you know, there's some people who grew up around the time I grew up, so they recognize this movie, you know, like, hey, I lived there during that period. But I was shocked. I honestly thought like most modern people would be like, what the fuck? This is an inscrutable fucking document from the past. It don't matter whether you grew up in the 80s or not. Like, movie loving is movie loving, no matter what age, you know. So this movie certainly doesn't stand shoulder to shoulder in terms of quality or significance with a Cinema Paradiso, but like Cinema Paradiso, celebrates something that brings us all together. The true faith for those of us who, you know, look to cinema, as they say in the movie, like, you know, movies make life make sense. That there are a bunch of us for whom that is true. We populate the internet, for fucking sake. Like, we're the ones that are the bread and butter of the internet and shit like that. And so making a movie for that group, even though that wasn't my intention, I was like, this is for all those cats. It was for me. But I was that person and still am that person. And that reads and seems to play for people, you know? And even though the movie, again, doesn't like break new ground and shit like that, people are letting it ride. Not go, you know, they're like, I'm not looking to this movie for what it brings to the table that's new. I'm looking to this movie for what it brings to the table that's true. And this motherfucker truly loves cinema, as do I, as a movie fan or something like that. So I think that's why it's connected. For whatever reason, I'm just happy.
No, I'm happy it is too. It's just a great watching. Before I have to let you go, I have to ask you, what were some of your movie hopping, your theater hopping journeys? Do you remember some of the movies you got to see? You mentioned Friday 13th Part 2, which I'm like, I could do a whole interview with you about horror films. I would love to do that one day. But no,
I'm down
do you
like
remember some of your theater hopping?
Absolutely. Let's see. I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, was it 47 times in a movie theater? And that was because like I never paid to see it. My father paid the first time. Every other time I would go see it as the third movie. You'd go see a new movie and then you'd hop from theater to theater. Eventually you'd wind up in Raiders of the Lost Ark because it played at the movie theater in our area for a fucking year straight, man. Wow. So like I got to see that movie multiple times. I was a big Carrie Fisher fan, had a huge crush on her. So I saw Under the Rainbow 18 times in a movie theater, only paid to see it once, or my parents paid for it the one time. The rest of the time is when I went to other movies and then snuck into that. When I saw Scarface with John Kovic when we were in, I think, 8th grade, I paid to see, I forget what the movie was at the time. Might have been The Secret of Nim. It was a cartoon. But we paid to see that movie. And then we went down to the brand new second theater where they were showing Scarface. And we were the only two people at a 8 p.m. screening of Scarface. So my mom dropped us off, but John Kovic's mom was picking us up. And she came early. Like my mom would have come late. We would have been fine. But John Kovic's mom, Dottie Kovic, she comes early. And she goes into the theater because she's so early. And she doesn't see us in the one theater. So she goes down to the other theater and walks in where me and John Kovic are watching Scarface. And it's at the point where Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio is walking in, you know, topless in underwear, pulling a gun out of her panties and going, "You want to fuck me, Tony?" And Ms. Kovic went wide-eyed and just fucking stormed out of the theater. I remember John was like, "We got to go." And I was like, "Not yet, man. This is almost the end. We got to wait to the credits and stuff." And we finished the flick, got berated the whole ride home. She was like, "How did you get into that movie?" And we had to explain the science of paying for one movie and sneaking into another, something Mrs. Kovic was completely unfamiliar with.
I love seeing that happened recently with like the Wild Robot and Terrifier, and I'm like, I'm glad that tradition still lives.
That made me so happy. That made me so happy because it felt like early in my career. I remember when Mallrats came out. Now and Then, I think it was called, came out the same day, and they had a fucking bump in their box office, which a lot of folks on the studio side was like, they paid to see that and then went to see Mallrats, and I was like, why? Because Mallrats is R, and I'm like, God damn it. So I was happy to see that still happens.
Oh, that's awesome. Kevin, thank you so much for speaking with me. Like, I got to interview you and John Waters in 1 year, my gay stoner self. I'm blessed for the rest of my life. Like, I'm checking that off my list.
Isn't he great? I gave him an award recently. I presented him with an award at the editors award. And he, you know, I've known him a little bit for years. He's absolutely wonderful and everything, of course, you always want him to be. And like me, he does that thing. Like, I remember having a conversation about, like, you and I, like, are the only two that really do it, like, that play the director and talk about it on stage and shit like that. And he goes, I do that more than I make movies. And I was like, I too spend more time talking about making movies on stage than I actually do making movies. And he goes, Kevin, it's all the same thing. It's storytelling. He's going, so whether I'm doing it behind a camera or doing it by myself on a stage, I'm doing what I've always been doing. And I love that because that's how I see the job. But he also had like a moment that made me laugh out loud because, you know, he's a fucking sexual being and stuff. He's looking at his phone and he's going, oh my God. He goes, somebody had just offered to front fuck me. What is that? He's like, when did that become a thing? Is that a term of art? And I was like, I don't know. Is it? You've just introduced me to the term.
Oh my goodness. Well, you know, great point there. Like, you guys are the reason I'm a film critic and I love interviews and stuff. You guys were like, you know, my 90s pop-up video kind of people of like, oh, these guys talking about movies. I love these guys. So no, thank you so much. It has been a great honor to speak with you. And I hope to do this again soon because you've been a blast.
Anytime you need, man. You want to sit around and talk about horror movies. Believe me, I'm your guy, particularly 80s. Oh, fuck.
Oh goodness, thank you. Sleepaway Camp. I want to talk to you. I need your feelings on that
Oh,
one
of
day.
course, man. Fucking one of the first movies I ever saw Dick in. I could do hours on Sleepaway Camp.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. Have a good day. Okay.